The morning of my board presentation, the apartment was completely quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Wrong quiet. The kind that makes you stop and listen harder, like something's missing, but you can't name it yet. I stood in the kitchen in my blazer, coffee going cold on the counter, and just listened. My brother was supposed to be there. My parents were supposed to call at 7 to wish me luck. It was the biggest day of my career. The day I was presenting Hollowell and Crane's regional expansion plan to the executive board, a plan I'd spent 11 months building from scratch. My manager had told me privately that if this went well, I was looking at a VP title before 40. I was 31. Nobody called. I picked up my phone and checked. Nothing from my brother Theo. Nothing from my mom or my dad. There was a message from my cousin Elise that said good luck today. With 3 exclamation points, and I stared at it longer than I needed to because it was the only one. I told myself they were busy. My mom worked early shifts at the hospital. My dad was retired, but he forgot things sometimes. Theo. Well, Theo was Theo. I grabbed my laptop bag and my coffee, and I left. I should explain something about my family before I go further because, without that context, none of this makes sense. I grew up the second of 2 kids in a mid-sized house in Columbus, Ohio. My brother Theo is 4 years older than me, and from the time I can remember, Theo was the one who got the spotlight. Not because he was particularly talented or particularly hardworking, but because he was louder, and my parents rewarded loud. He played football in high school, and my parents went to every game. I ran cross-country for 3 years, and I think my dad came to one meet, and only because it was at a school 20 minutes from our house. When Theo dropped out of Ohio State after 2 semesters, my parents let him move back home, paid his car insurance, covered his phone bill. When I got my MBA on a partial scholarship and took on the rest in loans, my mom said, "Just make sure it's worth it." I don't say this to sound like I was a victim. I wasn't. I built my life the way I wanted to, and I'm proud of what I made. But I want you to understand the pattern because it repeated itself for 30 years in ways big and small, and on the morning of my board presentation, I still, somehow, expected them to call. That's the part I'm most embarrassed about, honestly. Not what they did. The fact that I was still surprised. I'd been at Hollowell and Crane for 6 years when the regional expansion project landed on my desk. It started as a research assignment, evaluate whether we should open satellite offices in the Southeast. Standard stuff. But I saw something in the data that nobody else had flagged. 3 mid-market cities that were dramatically underserved in our sector, with local businesses actively looking for exactly what we offered. I built a full model around it. 12-month rollout, projected revenue at 18 months, staffing structure, lease cost comparisons, risk analysis. My manager, Mr. Whitfield, looked at it and said, "This is either going to make your career or embarrass both of us." He submitted it to the executive board. They scheduled a presentation for a Tuesday in March. The Tuesday in March was today. My parents and Theo knew. I'd told them over dinner 3 weeks before, when I thought things were still normal. I'd driven to Columbus on a Sunday, brought food, sat at the kitchen table like I used to. I walked them through what the project was, why it mattered. My mom nodded and said, "That's wonderful, honey," the way she said it when she wasn't really listening. My dad asked if I was still renting or if I'd bought yet. Theo looked at his phone through most of it, but when I mentioned the date, March 18th, and said it was the most important professional moment of my life so far, my mom wrote it on the little whiteboard on the fridge. She wrote it right there. March 18th. Addie's big day. My name is Adeline. Addie to family. She wrote it on the board. The presentation went well. Better than well. I stood in front of 9 executives in a glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor, and I walked them through everything. I'd rehearsed it so many times that by the end it didn't feel like a pitch, it felt like a conversation. Like I was just explaining something I understood deeply because I did. There were questions, hard ones. One of the board members, a woman named Ms. Tilson, who had a reputation for cutting proposals apart in the room, asked me about the labor market assumptions in my Year 1 model. I'd anticipated that question. I had a supplemental slide. When it was over, Mr. Whitfield shook my hand in the hallway and said, The Southeast offices are happening, and you're running the pilot. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and when the doors closed, I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 11 months. My phone buzzed. It was Theo. The message said, "Hey, sorry, missed your thing today. We're in Scottsdale for the week. Dad's birthday trip. Mom wanted it to be a surprise for him, so we kept it low-key, ELOAL. How'd it go?" I read it 3 times. Scottsdale. My dad's birthday is March 22nd. It's the same date every year. I know because I've sent a card every year since I moved out, even the years he forgot mine. They had planned a birthday trip for a birthday that was 4 days away. They'd planned it during the week of March 18th, and at no point, not when I told them at dinner, not when my mom wrote it on the board, not in 3 weeks of silence, did anyone think to mention it, or to reschedule, or to call. They just went. I stood outside my office building in the March wind, laptop bag on my shoulder, the best professional news of my life still warm in my chest, and I read my brother's message again. How'd it go? I put my phone in my pocket and walked to the parking garage. I didn't answer. Here's what I want to say about that choice, because I think people misunderstand what silence means when you choose it deliberately. It wasn't coldness. It wasn't strategy. It was more like, I finally had proof of something I'd suspected for a long time, and the proof was so clear that I didn't have anything to argue with. You can't negotiate with someone who doesn't notice they've done something wrong. You can't explain betrayal to someone who's already texted how to go like they missed a casual coffee. I went home. I changed out of my blazer. I ordered Thai food and sat on my couch and called my cousin Elise, who had sent the 3 exclamation points at 7 in the morning, and I told her everything. She said, "Oh, Addie." Just that. She knew the history. Later that night, my mom texted, "Hope today went well. It's gorgeous here. Dad is so happy." There was a photo attached, my parents and Theo at a resort pool. Sunglasses, drinks, blue sky. My dad was laughing at something off camera. I looked at the photo for a long time. My dad looked genuinely happy. I don't say that bitterly. He was happy on his birthday trip. That was real. I just wasn't anywhere in that picture. I never really had been. I turned off my phone and went to sleep. The VP announcement came 6 weeks later. Mr. Whitfield sent a company-wide email. Vice President of Regional Development, effective May 1st. My name, my project summary, a line about the Southeast pilot launching in Q3. The email went to everyone at Hollowell and Crane, about 300 people across 4 offices. One of those people was my dad's younger brother, my uncle Roland. He's been in commercial real estate for 20 years and had some kind of indirect professional connection to our firm through a shared client. I didn't know he was in our system. But he was, and he forwarded the email to my mom. I didn't know any of this had happened until my phone lit up on a Wednesday afternoon with 11 messages in a row. My mom, Adeline, "Your Uncle Roland just sent me something. Is this true?" My mom again, VP, "At 31? Why didn't you tell us?" My mom again, "I'm so proud of you. Please call me." Then Theo, Bro, you're a VP? That's insane." Then my dad, which was unusual because he almost never texted, "Your mother showed me." "Congratulations, Adeline. I mean that." Then my mom, 4 more times, each one a little more urgent. I sat with my phone in my hand and I thought about the whiteboard in the kitchen, the one where she'd written March 18. Addie's big day and then gone to Scottsdale anyway. I thought about Theo's text. How'd it go? I thought about 11 months of work, and the one morning I'd needed them to just call, and the quiet apartment, and the coffee going cold. I put my phone face down on my desk and finished my afternoon. Elise called me that evening. She'd heard from my mom, who'd apparently called her trying to reach me. "She's upset," Elise said carefully. "I know. She keeps saying she didn't realize how big the presentation was. She wrote it on the whiteboard, Elise." A pause. "I know. She wrote it in marker on the whiteboard in the kitchen. I watched her do it." "I know, Addie." We were quiet for a moment. Outside my apartment window, Columbus evening traffic moved slow and orange lit. "I'm not angry," I told Elise, and I was surprised to find that was true. I think that's what's strange. I thought I'd be angry, but I'm just... I don't know. I'm done expecting things. Elise said, that's either very healthy or very sad. Probably both. I didn't call my mom back that week. Or the next. It wasn't punishment. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't a plan. I was just genuinely busy. The VP transition involved more handoffs and onboarding than I'd expected, and I was flying to Charlotte twice to meet with the Southeast pilot team. And when I got home at night, I was tired in a way that left no room for the emotional labor of explaining to my family why I felt what I felt. And truthfully, I didn't know how to have that conversation without it turning into what every conversation with my family eventually turned into. Me softening my feelings so they didn't have to sit with discomfort. Me reassuring them. Me ending up somehow in the position of managing their reaction to something they had done to me. I was tired of that particular choreography, so I worked. I built my pilot team. I flew to Charlotte and Raleigh and Greenville. I hired 2 regional managers and a support coordinator, and I found office space in all 3 cities. I got really good at my job in a way that felt clean and uncomplicated because work had always been the place where what I put in matched what I got back. My cousin Elise came to visit in April. We went to a winery in the hills east of Columbus and sat outside in the late afternoon light, and she told me my mom had cried on the phone to her. That she felt terrible. That she didn't understand why I wasn't returning calls. Do you think she really doesn't understand why I wasn't returning calls? Do you think she really doesn't understand? I asked. Elise looked at her glass. I think she understands more than she's admitting. But I also think she genuinely loves you and is genuinely confused, and those 2 things can both be true. I nodded. I thought about the whiteboard again. Elise, I said, if you had a big day, the biggest day of your career, and I flew to Vegas with my family the same week and texted you afterward like I'd missed a brunch, what would you think? She didn't answer for a long time. I think you'd made your choice, she finally said. Yeah, I said. Me too. The article ran in mid-May. Hollowell and Crane had a PR team, and they decided the Southeast pilot was a story worth telling. Young VP, aggressive regional growth, non-traditional market targets. They pitched it to a regional business journal. The journalist was thorough. She interviewed me twice, spent time with my financial models, talked to the Southeast market analysts who'd independently validated my projections. The article ran 6 pages in the print edition. Online it had a photo and a pull-out quote, and a headline that said something like, "The analyst who saw what no one else was looking for." My photo was on the website's landing page for 2 days because it was among their most read stories that week. My dad's brother Roland sent it to the family. This time it wasn't 11 texts. It was a phone call from my mom at 7 in the morning, and when I didn't pick up, a voicemail. I listened to the voicemail 3 times because I needed to make sure I was hearing it right. She was crying. She said she'd read the whole thing. She said she was so proud. And this is the part I listened to 3 times, she said, "I just can't believe we were in Scottsdale. I can't believe we missed it. I'm so sorry, Addie. I don't know how we let that happen. I don't know how we let that happen." I sat with that sentence. It was the closest thing to accountability I'd heard, and it was also exactly the kind of sentence that doesn't quite land the blame anywhere. Let that happen. Like it was weather. Like Scottsdale had occurred to them as a family unbidden, same week as my presentation, by some atmospheric coincidence. I understood why she said it that way. I'm not sure she had another way to say it. But I noticed. I didn't call back that morning. I called her on a Sunday afternoon about a week later. Not because I'd decided to forgive everything and move forward as if nothing happened, but because Elise was right. My mom genuinely loved me, and the distance I put between us was costing me something too, even if I wasn't ready to say what. She picked up before the second ring. We talked for an hour. Most of it was careful and a little stilted, the way conversations are when both people are trying not to step on something fragile. She cried twice. I didn't, but not because I wasn't moved. I think I'd processed most of the feeling already, alone in Charlotte airports and late office nights. At some point, she said, I think we don't always know how to show up for you the way we should. I said, I know, Mom. We're going to do better. I said, I'd like that. And I meant it. Not because I believed it would immediately look different, but because I wanted to give it the chance to be true. That's different from hoping hard enough to get hurt again. It's more like keeping the door open at a reasonable distance, seeing what comes through. Theo texted a few days after the call. He said he'd read the article. He said, "You've always been the smart one." I think I never said that enough. Sorry, I'm kind of a mess. Love you. It was the most honest thing he'd sent me in years. I wrote back, "I love you too. You're not a mess, you're just still figuring it out. So am I." Which was true. The Southeast pilot opened in August, Charlotte first, then Raleigh 6 weeks later, then Greenville in October. The numbers from Charlotte in the first quarter were better than my projections. Not dramatically, 8% above forecast, but enough that Mr. Whitfield forwarded me the report with a single line, "Told you." I printed it out. I know that's old-fashioned. I taped it to the wall of my home office next to a photo Elise took at the winery. Just the two of us, late afternoon light, laughing at something I can't remember. And next to that, I put the article. Not because I needed to see my own name in print, but because those three things together tell the true story of that year. The work, the person who showed up, the result. There's no whiteboard in my apartment. I keep my calendar on my phone, but if I did have a whiteboard, I know what would be written on it. March 18, the day I stopped waiting. Not bitterly, just factually. That morning in the quiet apartment with the cold coffee, before I'd heard a single word about Scottsdale, something shifted. I stopped measuring my success by whether my family noticed it. I stopped calibrating my own sense of what I'd achieved against whether they called. I don't think they're bad people. I really don't. I think my parents loved their children the best they knew how, and sometimes that best was uneven in ways that left marks. I think Theo is genuinely trying in his clumsy, too-late way. I think my mom standing in her kitchen reading a business journal article about her daughter and crying into the phone was real. But I also think you can love people and still choose not to let their inconsistency determine the shape of your life. I had the biggest year of my career. I built something I'm proud of. 3 cities, 2 regional managers, 1 VP title, and a quarterly report taped to my wall. They almost missed the whole thing. I almost let that ruin it. I'm glad I didn't. I've thought a lot about what causes a life to turn out the way it does. Not in a mystical way, just practically. The way a river cuts its path, not because of one rainstorm, but because of the slow, consistent pressure of water over time. What happened with my family wasn't one event. It was 30 years of small moments that all pointed the same direction. Every cross-country meet my dad didn't show up to. Every loan Theo didn't repay. Every conversation where I softened what I actually felt so the room stayed comfortable. Each one of those things was small. Together they built a structure I'd been living inside without realizing it, a structure where my needs were negotiable and everyone else's were not. The morning of my board presentation, when the apartment was quiet and no one called, that structure finally became visible to me, not because I was looking for it, because I had finally built something significant enough that its absence couldn't be explained away. That's the thing about integrity, and I mean the word in its original sense, the structural sense. Like the integrity of a building. You don't notice it until something puts pressure on it. I had spent 6 years building my career with real integrity. 11 months on one project, every assumption stress-tested, every number sourced. When the pressure came, the board, the questions. Ms. Brott, Tilson's challenge about my year 1 model, the structure held, because I had built it to hold. My family hadn't built that with me. Not out of cruelty, I don't think. Out of habit. Out of the comfortable assumption that I would always be there, always be fine, always need less than I actually did. And when the structure of that assumption was finally tested, when the business journal article landed on Uncle Roland's desk and made its way to my mom's phone, it didn't hold. Because they had never really load-tested it. What I learned from Addie, from watching my own life from the inside, which is the only view any of us ever get, is that which you invest in consistently is what survives. I invested in my work consistently. I invested in my relationship with Elise consistently. I did not invest in the performance of being fine when I wasn't, and so eventually I stopped being able to perform it. That wasn't a breakdown. That was integrity, quietly doing its job. The silence I chose wasn't revenge. It wasn't even a decision exactly, it was just the natural result of years of giving my energy to things that gave something back. When the thing that had never given back finally showed up wanting something, I didn't have the energy to perform gratitude for its arrival. I had somewhere else to be. And here's what I keep coming back to. The board presentation happened whether my family called or not. Charlotte opened on schedule. The numbers came in above forecast. The article ran. My name was on it. None of that waited for their permission. None of it required their acknowledgement to be real. The work was real because I made it real. One honest decision at a time for 6 years, in offices and airports and spreadsheets and late nights. That's the only kind of payback that lasts. Not what you say to the people who underestimated you. What you build while they're not watching.